Canadians seem to be itching for an election. More polling showing that if an election were held today, pretty good chance we'd see a change at the top. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me is Brian Lilley. So, a recent Abacus data poll has shown what many have shown over the course of the last year, Brian, and that is consistent gain and momentum for the Poilievre Conservatives. So, what do we see now?
We're seeing nationally a 10-point gap, 38% for the Conservatives, 28% for the Liberals, 18% for the NDP, and then, well, the rest don't really matter, do they, outside of the bloc in Quebec? And in Quebec, Trudeau and his Liberals remain competitive with the bloc. Abacus has the Conservatives at about 20%. That gives them at least their 10 seats, if not a little bit more. Maybe they go up to 12 or 14 seats in Quebec. They're never really going to go above that in any foreseeable future. But what's interesting is the Liberals' Atlantic red wall appears to be maybe melting away, rotting away due to the waves crashing against it. They used to get 50%. Abacus has them at about 37%. The Conservatives just behind them. But they also have the Conservatives leading in Ontario by a small amount, but by a large amount in British Columbia. Everyone says the election is won in Ontario. To a degree, that's true. But the Trudeau Liberals won in the last election by taking pretty much everything in Atlantic Canada and winning a bunch of new seats in British Columbia. So if the Tories are well ahead of the Liberals in British Columbia, if they're ahead by a few points in Ontario, if they're competitive in Atlantic Canada, this changes the math completely, Adrienne. And the poll goes on to show all kinds of things that we can talk about, like Pierre Poilievre ahead of Trudeau when it comes to women voters or union voters or different demographics. This is significant, and it's not the first poll to show it. It is part of a trend of polls showing this.
Traditionally, opposition parties do poll a little bit better than the government outside of an election time frame. I mean, governments make decisions that don't make Canadians happy, for example. But I think it's important to watch the trend, as you mentioned. There's been a consistent erosion for Liberal support. So what does it spell to you? Is it more about people are frustrated and just frankly tired of Justin Trudeau and his massive major gaffes, be it back here or internationally, his cabinet ministers with their gaffes? Or is it about Pierre Poilievre's message? Because he himself has had some missteps that always get amplified negatively and adversely in the media. So what do you attribute this sort of significant 10-point gap to?
I think it's a bit of both. Look, there's an old saying in Canadian politics, governments defeat themselves. But if the opposition party on the other side isn't showing themselves to be a government in waiting, chances are we're not going to see a change. And for the longest time, when you've looked at the polls, yeah, the Conservatives might be ahead. They might even be ahead by a few points. But it was always like just a few months ago, you would see a Leger poll in March, 32% for the Liberals, 33% for the Conservatives. Well, that's not going to change anything. That would give us the same result that we have right now. But over the last several months, the last time the Liberals led was the end of May, 33-31. Again, not much of a change. But since then, you've been seeing Liberal support dropping down to 30%, 29%, 28%, and Conservative support going from 32 up to 35, 37, and in this latest poll, 38. So then I mentioned the regional breakdowns earlier of Ontario, BC, Atlantic Canada, because that's what really matters. If those regions don't change, if parties keep what they've got now, well, the Conservatives can win every seat in Saskatchewan. It doesn't matter if they're not winning in Ontario and British Columbia as well. The Liberals can win every seat in Atlantic Canada, but if they don't win in Ontario and British Columbia, well, somebody else is going to win. It's going to be the Conservatives. So those regional things matter. But you've long heard that Pierre Poilievre can't connect with women. Women don't like him. Well, right now, in this latest Abacus poll, it's 32% for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives among female voters, 28% for for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. They've actually been very close in several polls from several polling companies for the last little while. Neither one of them was breaking out. They'd be at that 28, 29, 30, 31 sort of thing. This shows a bit of a break, and it's a sizable poll. It's 2,500 people. That's significant. You look at union membership, and it's about a 10-point gap. I believe it's 39 to 28% for the Conservatives. You look at who's best on the economy, which is the number one issue right now, and almost half say the Conservatives, and the Liberals are well back. The Liberals are even third on healthcare, with the Conservatives and the NDP virtually tied. It's a statistical tie between the two on which party can best deal with healthcare. So there seems to be a bit of a shift going on as people look at what issues matter to them. Is Pierre Poilievre speaking to them? Well, if you listen to the man, he's speaking about the economy a lot. He's speaking about the cost of living. None of us that go to the grocery store, none of us that fill up our gas tanks, none of us who have to renew a mortgage or try and deal with the landlord on a rent payment, none of us are escaping inflation at the moment. Everyone's feeling it. Pierre Poilievre is talking about that and giving credible alternatives to Justin Trudeau's approach, which hasn't worked. They're celebrating the fact that core inflation is down to 2.8%, but we're still paying almost 10% more for food than we did a year ago, 30% more for your mortgage payment than you did a year ago. That's where it really hurts.
But one thing we all know matters, and that's campaigning. And Justin Trudeau is a very good campaigner. And all it takes, because it happens after election, after election, after election, one Conservative candidate, MP, whatever the case is, to say something that is, shall we say, slightly offside, and that can upend an entire election campaign for a week's time. And the Liberals are very good at exploiting that significant weakness on the Conservative side of the aisle. Do you think Pierre Poilievre is the kind of leader that perhaps other Conservative leaders have not been able to, meaning Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, that can keep some of that in line? Is it possible to have a not scandal-free, but certainly gaffe-free election where it doesn't eclipse, a week or two of their messaging?
Watching Poilievre and how he campaigns, I think he looks at what my late friend Andrew Breitbart did. Andrew Breitbart said, "Walk into the fire." And Pierre Poilievre will just walk right past these things and not sit and ooh and ah and worry about it. He deals with issues in a much more efficient way, and he doesn't take the false claims of racism and other isms that will get thrown inevitably at a Conservative leader, and he takes on the media and does it quite well. Recently, one tried to cite a journal, an obscure European journal, that said inflation has no impact on the price of food, while he was holding a news conference in a grocery store that had increased prices, and he schooled that journalist, including having the owner of the grocery store explain to him how the price of fuel was driving up his delivery costs. So I don't see it going in the same way. But you're right. The Conservatives have to deal with that more, not because they're more prone to it, but because the media amplify it more when it's a Conservative. Yeah. That I have written about all kinds of awful things that Liberal candidates have said, but if they're flying under the Trudeau banner, they don't get picked up. They don't get amplified. They're given the benefit of the doubt in the way that Conservatives aren't by most of the media, who have been, but may not now be, on Trudeau's side. I think he's losing many members of the gallery. I think a lot of people, not just voters, but a lot of gallery members, I think, outside of CBC, are looking at him and saying, this guy isn't what we thought he was.
Well, sure, it took them a long time to figure that out. But sadly, we know that there's only really one person in Canada that can get us to the polls anytime soon, and that is NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. But he doesn't seem to be wanting to stiffen his spine anytime soon. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think. Go to thetorontosun.com. You're going to find more information on stories like this and coverage you will not find anywhere else.